So for that, we want to use a package, or I want to use a package, and I think it's a great package. It's called shared preferences. So we're going to go flutter pub get, pub add, and it's just shared underscore preferences. And one thing else we want to install, which we have used before in previous videos, is a really nice Singleton manager called Get-It. So flutter pub add get-it. Okay, so the storage library, which again is called, what was it called again? Shared preferences. We're going to be using that to basically store key value pairs. In order to work with this, we can, just by looking at the docs, work with it kind of as a one-off way. But I like to, there's times that you can work directly with a library, but usually it's nice to kind of make your own file that kind of is a shim in between that library. And this is a perfect use case for doing that. So I'm going to make a new file here called storage. Storage.dart. And we are going to create a way to manage our storage in a nice way, all through this one interface instead of working directly with that third-party library. This file will work with the third-party library, but we don't want to be doing that throughout. So here we're going to be creating, first of all, an abstract class. And it's going to be called storage provider and storage provider. And it's going to extend change notifier. It's abstract, so we'll never actually be using this on its own. Instead, we're going to be creating a class called storage provider implementation. And you've seen this pattern before in previous videos. If you've seen the fast Flutter to-do list. So this is the class we're actually going to work with, whereas this is going to be sort of our header class, where we define certain things. So a couple things I want to do is we're going to have a variable that we store called ready, and it's going to be equal to false by default because this thing's not ready to go until we say it is. And there's a few things we want to do. We want to create an init function, which is going to be a future. And the reason I use here future is because working with storage is an asynchronous task. It's never instant. It's done kind of like in a different thread. So a lot of this stuff will be asynchronous. We're also going to have a future where we're going to get a string back from it. And this will be get item. And we're going to pass in a string called key. All right, we need a way to save an item to our local storage, which won't return anything, but it is going to have a string of key and a string of value. So you know what we want to pass in. We'll also make something to remove items. Remove item, string key. And lastly, let's make another function called clear, which won't take anything. That's just basically saying clear my entire thing. So cool. Now this is giving us this little error here saying, it's missing some things. That's because we've declared them up there in the abstract class, but we've never actually created them here. So VS Code lets us do that really easily. Create 5 missing overrides. So here we go. We have all of our items. Now I don't really like the order that it put it in. I think init should be the very first one. And I feel like clear should be the very last one. I feel like these are just personal decisions, but I think it should be basically get, set, remove, and clear. So we'll do that there. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to have something in this class, which is of type shared preferences. And this is the third-party library we're using. You can see if we, there it is there, shared preferences. And we're just going to call this underscore storage. And because we're not initializing it, and we can't actually initialize it here because we want to initialize it asynchronously, we will just make it null safe, or make it optional. But in our init function, this is where we would go storage equals, and we have to await, meaning this has to be async, shared preferences dot get instance. And this is just something we can call to get an instance so that it's working with one thing, no matter who, no matter when we call the storage, we call this, it's always going to be working with this one instance. So we're not going to have weird, state issues. Okay, so that is just our initialization function, and then everything is good. After we initialize, though, let's just set ready equal to true. And this is just so if we ever want to, because this is public, it's not an underscore. If our code data check, hey, is this thing even ready to work with yet? We have a way to do that, and it will be ready as soon as this happens, which probably happens pretty quick, but it doesn't happen instantly. Okay, furthermore, get item. This is something I want to go put in a try catch loop, because what if you try and get something that doesn't exist? So what we want to do is return storage dot, and I have to use an exclamation mark because storage could be null, although in our logic, we're going to always make sure that this gets initialized right at the start of our application, which you'll see in a bit. So storage will actually never be null, but just to work with it, we technically have to do this. Get string key. So basically, underscore storage. And then we need our catch in case something happens, which we can go and we'll just return null whenever this happens. And that's why we have this here. Now, this needs to be async, because get string is, these things are async. Wait, should this be a wait then? No. Let's just see this. Get string, cool. Okay. So this is just something we can do on our storage, get string, and it's just going to return that string. Okay, to set an item, we can just go await storage dot set string key value. You just pass in the key and the value, and this needs to be async as well. There we go. Remove item. We'll just await storage dot remove, and we'll remove it at that key, and this needs to be async. And we'll make clear async before we even write it out, so it doesn't complain at us. And the clear is just await storage dot clear. Okay, so now we sort of have this provider, and this will just mean we can work with this one thing to deal with all of our lovely storage stuff. Okay, so in our main Dart file, we need to do a couple things here. So we're using something called getIt, and that allows us to have a class like this that we've made and work with it as a singleton. So there's not going to be like multiple instances of it that could be conflicting. So the first thing we actually have to do, and I just like to do this right at the start of my application, is create something called getIt, and it's going to be equal to getIt dot instance, like that. And because this isn't an underscore, it's public, so our other files can actually talk to this thing and get access to this specific instance. Then right under here, what we want to do is actually register the singleton. So we do getIt dot register singleton, and in here we want to pass in essentially the name of the singleton, or the name of the implementation. But it's always good practice, and I think you are required to do this, to talk about what are we talking about here? Well, it's the storage provider. So we want to create a singleton of the storage provider, and then inside the function, we actually pass in storage provider implementation. And then let's do signals ready true. There we go. So this will register our singleton that we can work with. I'll just put a comma there so it's a little bit cleaner. And then what we want to do is await. And to work with any getIt things is you actually just write getIt, and then the type of which singleton you're working with, in this case the storage provider, and then you go and you call whatever public functions you have. And in this case, we want to await the init. So before anything happens with running our app, we just want to make sure, okay, cool, that this is initialized, which again just basically sets that shared preferences instance and then tells itself that it's ready. All right, so now that we have this, we can, do some stuff with it. So now what I'm going to do, just because this library does require a full rebuild, the shared preferences, if we start to work with it, in fact, if I refresh now, you're going to see unhandled exception, missing plugin exception. Anytime you see this, it usually means you installed something that requires a full rebuild. So I'm going to click stop. And I'm going to then rebuild with Control F5, and that will kind of build in the background while we're getting the next stuff set up. Okay, so what I want to do after all this text is I want to create a text form field. And this is just so we can, play around with our local storage. And let's just give it some decoration of input decoration and give it a label text of, remember this. And let's just see how that looks now that it's basically booting. So I'm going to save, and we should see this nice text box here, and we can type in this. That's just the simple text form field. Now, in order to work with this, we do want to create a controller. I'm going to turn this into a stateful widget now. So Control-Shift-R on my app, and you'll see we have convert to stateful widget. So let's just do that. And the reason for that is that, there's some little bit of state stuff we're going to be doing now. So let's create something called a text editing controller. Called _controller, and it's going to be equal to text editing controller. Then what we want to do is we're going to have an init state function that we can override. And within here, I essentially want to grab that thing from local storage and set it. Now, because everything with local storage is asynchronous, and I want to use await, we actually have to create another function, and I like to just usually call it _init, and it is going to be asynchronous. That way we can just call init, and then within here we can still do like awaits. So first of all, let's figure out how to do that. So we want to get that save value from our local storage. Save value equals, and we'll do await, and we'll use get it storage provider dot, and you can get the autocomplete here of the things we've made, get item, and let's just say we had something, the key was saved, for instance. Then what we can do is take our controller dot text and make it equal to saved value. Now, because save value can be null, we do need to, and in this case it will be null because we haven't saved anything yet. Let's just use our double question marks here and just say, if nothing's found, let's just make it that. Lastly, what I want to do is have one more variable here, a Boolean variable called ready. It's going to be false. And at the very end of this, after it's done this await, essentially, let's just do set state and ready equals true. Then what we can do down here is where we have this sort of padding and stuff, let's actually, let's check the value of ready. If ready, actually, I like to sometimes do it this way. If not ready, we want to actually return a center with a child of circular progress indicator. Otherwise, this is a ternary expression, we will return what we want. Meaning by the time we get here, we know that it will be it'll be ready. The one last thing we have to do is actually connect the dots between this text form field and our controller. So we just do controller equals controller. And we'll just do a little refresh here. Cool. Now it would be, it's putting the value of whatever we've saved to local storage in there, and if it's null, it's going to put it as a blank string. So it is a blank string because we haven't saved anything there. So let's create a button so that we can actually save it. And let's just use elevated button. Elevated button on pressed. We'll do in a minute. Let's just give it text, and let's just say the word like save. Oops, save that. So that's going to be there. Now, how do we work with this? Well, pretty simply, we just do get it. And again, the storage provider dot, and we have something called set item. And the key, what do we call it? It was up here, saved. I'll copy that so that there's no errors. And the value we want to use is basically controller.text. Okay, so if I type something here and click save, and do a green refresh. Let's see. It still seems to be there, but to really prove if this is working, let's make it something cooler. Hello, Flutter, and I'll save that. And of course, we could make this form way better with validation and all that kind of stuff, but that's not the purpose of today's tutorial. So I'm just going to close the app. There we go, it's closed, and we're going to rebuild the app. So the app's fully gone, it's out of memory, nothing, it's not going to remember anything in memory. But if this worked, it should still say hello Flutter when we go up. I would normally pause right now as it's building, but I want the anticipation of this working to be on everyone's mind. I'm scared. Yes, there it is. Hello Flutter. There we go. So we have saving. Now, remember when I copy and pasted this to make sure it's good? This is a dangerous thing, right? If we made a typo, say one of them was saved and one thing was saved, and we are accessing this in many different files, it gets really dangerous to work with. So what I like to do is actually make a new file called storagekeys.dart. And then we can actually make some constants in here. So storage key, remember, storage key, remember this. And we're going to just call that remember this. Obviously, this would be things like maybe your, you would call this like storage key underscore API token or storage key underscore first name or whatever. But as long as you have it here, and then this doesn't matter. You could technically call this whatever you want, but it just makes sense to have it a little bit better like that. So let's go, so storage key, and then basically what we can do is instead of saying saved, we can replace this with that. One sec, there we go. And where we set it, we can also use it. So now we're pointing to this constant so that we know there'll never be an issue, and we can just change it in this one spot, and everywhere that's accessing it will have it. So that's just the key of that we're saving, and that's just to make so there's less chance for error in typos. Okay, lastly, it would be great because something that a lot of the times you might use local storage for saving an API key, and your API key may only be relevant. You might want if you change environments, you don't necessarily want that same key stored because you're going to have like log in, log out issues. So one thing we can do to sort of improve our storage class here is actually make use of that environment variable, make use of our environment so that we're kind of prefixing all of our keys, all of our storage stuff with the name of the environment. So what we can do is very easily, I'm just going to do this in kind of multiple lines, and we'll probably clean it up into a single line. But let's just let's use our thing. Let's remember how to get it. So we have this env dot. So env, did that load? Env. Oh wait, I can't write. Sorry. Final. We'll call it prefix equals env dot, and let's use the name of our environment as kind of like a prefix. So that means what we can do is over here, every time we are getting an item, let's actually start with that prefix, and then just do kind of maybe like double underscore or like an underscore or something like that. And now, because of underscores could be part of the variable name, we actually do have to wrap it in these full things. So we can do prefix and then right here do key. So that means it's going to look for a key that's whatever key you passed in, but it's going to be starting with that prefix. Now, similarly, we're going to have to do the same thing for all of our things, setting, or at least setting and removing. We don't really care about it for clear because we can clear the whole thing. So let's just, instead of doing the word prefix, let's actually, just do it as a one-off line. So I'm going to copy this, and when we are setting string, value will still be the same, but we want the key always to be the key that we pass in with this sort of environment name prefixed. Then here, we want to remove it with that name prefixed. So I'm going to do a refresh here, and we should see that, remember, this became blank because now it's looking for something that is called a key that's called prod underscore. So let's make this say hello prod, and I'll save that. And if we just refresh, and the green arrow refresh is actually just as good as a full, removing the app. It is doing it kind of from scratch. So it is saying hello prod. Watch what happens when we change our environment in our environment base back to dev and do a green arrow refresh. We see that it's blank. Okay, that makes sense because now it's looking for a key called with prefixing with dev. So let's save that as hello dev and refresh. Now, hopefully, if all this worked, if we change back to prod, save and refresh, there we go, hello prod. So now anytime we're working with local storage, our keys are going to get automatically prefixed with whatever our environment name is, meaning when you switch between stage and dev and prod and whatever environments you have, you can also have your local storage kind of work within that sandbox. So that's basically it. This was a quick one, two pretty important topics that you're going to probably use a lot as you build Flutter apps. Thanks for watching.